Magnum Force, reviewed by Pauline Kael. Killing Time. Clint Eastwood isn't offensive. He isn't an actor, so one could hardly call him a bad actor. He'd have to do something before we could consider him bad at it. And acting isn't required of him in Magnum Force, which takes its name from the giant's phallus, the long-barreled Magnum 44 that Eastwood flourishes. Acting might even get in the way of what the movie is about, what a big man and a big gun can do. Eastwood's wooden impassivity makes it possible for the brutality in his pictures to be ordinary, a matter of routine. He may try to save a buddy from getting killed, but when the buddy gets hit, no time is wasted on grief. Eastwood couldn't express grief any more than he could express tenderness. With a Clint Eastwood, the action film can, indeed must, drop the pretense that human life has any value. At the same time, Eastwood's lack of reaction makes the whole show of killing seem so unreal that the viewer takes it on a different level from a movie in which the hero responds to suffering. In Magnum Force, killing is dissociated from pain. It's even dissociated from life. The killing is totally realistic, hideously, graphically so. Yet, since it's without emotion, it has no impact on us. We feel nothing toward the victims. We have no empathy when they get it, and no memory of them afterward. As soon as one person gets it, we're ready for the next. The scenes of carnage are big blowouts, parties for the audience to gasp at in surprise and pleasure. At an action film now, it just doesn't make much difference whether it's a good guy or a bad guy who dies, or a radiant young girl, or a double-dealing gyppy. Although the plots still draw the distinction, the writers and the directors no longer create different emotional tones for the deaths of good and bad characters. The fundamental mechanism of melodrama has broken down, I think. The audience at action pictures reacts to the killing scenes simply as spectacle. A tall, cold cod like Eastwood removes the last pretensions to humane feelings from the action melodrama, making it an impersonal, almost abstract exercise in brutalization. Eastwood isn't very different from many of the traditional, inexpressive, stalwart heroes of westerns and cops and robbers films, actors notoriously devoid of personality, but the change in action films can be seen in its purest form in him. He walks right through the mayhem without being affected by it, and we are not cued to be affected either. The difference is a matter of degree, but it's possible that this difference of degree has changed the nature of the beast. Or, to put it more accurately, the beast can now run wild. The audiences used to go mainly for the action, but also to hate the ruthless villains, sympathize with the helpless victims, and cheer on the protector of the weak heroes. It was the spaghetti westerns, which made Clint Eastwood a star, that first eliminated the morality play dimension and turned the western into pure violent reverie. Apart from their aesthetic qualities, and they did have some, what made these Italian-produced westerns popular was that they stripped the western form of its cultural burden of morality. They discarded its civility along with its hypocrisy. In a sense, they liberated the form. What the western hero stood for was left out, and what he embodied, strength and gunpowder, was retained. Abroad, that was probably what he had represented all along. In the figure of Clint Eastwood, the Western morality play and the myth of the Westerner were split. Now American movies treat even the American city the way the Italians treated the Old West. Our cops and robbers pictures are like urban spaghetti westerns. With our ethical fabric torn to shreds in this last decade, American action films such as Magnum Force and The Laughing Policeman are becoming daydream nightmares of indiscriminate mayhem and slaughter. The John Wayne figure, the man who stood for the right, in both senses, I fear, and in both senses within the movies themselves. has been replaced by a man who essentially stands for nothing but violence. Eastwood has to deliver death because he has no other appeal. He can barely speak a line of dialogue without making an American audience smile in disbelief, but his big gun speaks for him. The concept of the good guy has collapsed simultaneously in our society and in our movies. Eastwood isn't really a good guy. You don't like him the way you liked Wayne. You don't even enjoy him in the way you could enjoy a scoundrel. He's simply there with his Magnum force. For a hero who can't express himself in words or by showing emotion, shooting first and asking questions later has got to be the ultimate salvation. In Dirty Harry, Eastwood said to the hippie psychotic, "This is the most powerful handgun in the world, punk. It can blow your head off." The strong, quiet man of the action film has been replaced by the emotionally indifferent man. He's the opposite of Bogart, who knew pain. Perhaps the top box office star in the movie business, Eastwood is also the first truly stoned hero in the history of movies. There's an odd disparity between his deliberate, rather graceful physical movements and his practically timbreless voice. Only his hands seem fully alive. In Italian movies, the character he played was known as the man with no name, and he speaks in a small, dead, non-actor's voice that drops off to nowhere at the end of a line and that doesn't tell us a thing about him. While actors who are expressive may have far more appeal to educated people, Eastwood's inexpressiveness travels preposterously well. What he does is unmistakable in any culture. He's utterly unbelievable in his movies, inhumanly tranquil, controlled, and assured, and yet he seems to represent something that isn't so unbelievable. He once said of his first Italian Western, A Fistful of Dollars, that it established the pattern, that it was the first film in which the protagonist initiated the action. He shot first. Eastwood stands melodrama on its head. In his world, nice guys finish last. This is no longer the romantic world in which the hero is, fortunately, the best shot. Instead, the best shot is the hero. And that could be what the American audience for action films, grown derisive about the triumph of the good, was waiting for. Eastwood's gun power makes him the hero of a totally nihilistic dream world. Hollywood's flirtation with the ideology of the law and order advocates reached its peak 2 years ago with the release of Dirty Harry, a Warner Brothers picture directed by Don Siegel and starring Eastwood as the saintly tough cop Harry Callahan. A right-wing fantasy about the San Francisco police force as a helpless group emasculated by the liberals, the picture propagandized for paralegal police power and vigilante justice. The only way Harry could protect the city against the mad hippie killer who was terrorizing women and children was by taking the law into his own hands. The laws on the books were the object of his contempt because he knew what justice was and how to carry it out. The political climate of the country has changed, of course. And besides, Hollywood is, in its own cheaply Machiavellian way, responsive to criticism. In Magnum Force, the sequel to Dirty Harry, and also from Warner Brothers, Clint Eastwood, again playing Harry Callahan, is just as contemptuous of the laws on the books, but he believes in enforcing them. John Milius, who had an uncredited paw in Dirty Harry, and who gets the screenwriting credit here, along with Michael Cimino, twists the criticism of the earlier film to its own purpose. He takes the plot gimmick from those of us who attacked Dirty Harry for its fascist medievalism. The villains are now a Nazi-style elite cadre of clean-cut, dedicated cops who have taken the law into their own hands and are cleaning out the scum of the city, assassinating the labor racketeers, the drug dealers, the gangsters, and their groupies. They are explicit versions of what we accused Harry of being. They might be the earlier Harry's disciples, and the new Harry wipes them all out. I hate the goddamn system, he says, but I'll stick with it until something better comes along. Magnum Force disarms political criticism and still delivers the thrills of brutality. Harry doesn't bring anyone to court. The audience understands that Harry is the court. The picture is so sure it can get away with its political switch that before it allows Harry to spout his new Defender of the System line, it actually tweaks the audience and the movie press by implying that he is the assassin who's mowing down the gangsters. But the movie, and this is what is distinctively new about it, uses the same tone for the stormtroopers' assassination orgies that it used for Harry's killing of the stormtroopers. At no point are we asked to be appalled by homicide. We get the shocks without any fears for the characters' safety or any sadness or horror at their gory deaths. The characters aren't characters in any traditional sense. They're not meant to be cared about. Studio machine-made action pictures have the speedy, superficial adaptability of journalism. One can measure some of the past 2 years' changes in the society by comparing the two films. In Dirty Harry, the sniper villain, wearing a peace symbol on his belt, idly picked off an innocent girl in a bikini while she was swimming, and the pool filled with her blood. In Magnum Force, one of the young stormtroopers machine guns everyone at a gangland swimming pool party, and you get the impression that the girls prove their corruption and earn their deaths by being braless. Generally speaking, the victims now are all guilty of something, even if only of taking drugs, so you're exonerated. You don't have to feel anything. You can walk out and pretend you didn't see what went on. If the elite cadre and their prim Fuhrer, played by Hal Holbrook, represent what Harry the hero represented the first time around, and if it's now right for Harry the hero to kill them, what of the writers who confect one position and then the next? Do they believe in anything? I think they do. Despite the superficial obeisance to the rule of law, the underlying content of Magnum Force, the build-up of excitement and pleasure in brutality, is the same as that of Dirty Harry, and the strong man is still the dispenser of justice, which comes out of his gun. Harry says it. Nothing's wrong with shooting as long as the right people get shot. He's basically Paul Newman's Judge Roy Bean, another Milius concoction all over again. Although Ted Post's direction of Magnum Force is mediocre, the picture isn't as numbing as The Life and Times of Judge Roy Bean because it stays on its own course, formula entertaining level, trying to turn on the audience to the garish killings and sustaining a certain amount of suspense about what's coming next. It sticks to its rationale. In Magnum Force, Dirty Harry is still the urban garage man, cleaning up after us. His implicit justification is, you in the audience don't have the guts to do what I do, so don't criticize me. He says he does our dirty work for us, and so he invokes our guilt, and we in the audience don't raise the question, who asked you to? If Milius were a real writer instead of a hero idolater, he might begin to raise questions about whether Harry unconsciously manipulates himself into these situations because he likes to kill, and about whether he keeps his face stony so as not to reveal this. But Magnum Force, the new city western, has no mind and no class. The movie makers seem unaware that their hero lives and kills as affectlessly as a psychopathic personality. A man's got to know his limitations, Harry keeps saying, and it's a comment not on himself, but on his enemy's failure to recognize that he's the better man. Harry is tougher than the elite cadre, just as he was tougher than the mad hippie killer. The Nazis looked like a troop of juveniles in training for stardom in the old studio days, and are suspected by other cops of being homosexual. So Harry's weathered face and stud reputation, which is all hearsay as far as the audience goes, are like additional equipment for destroying them. But Eastwood is not a lover, Women flock to him, but he makes no moves toward them. From what we see, they have to do all the work. He accepts one as dispassionately as he declines another. In one sequence, a woman bares her feelings and tells Harry of her desire for him, while he just sits there, as unconcerned as ever. He's not going to get involved. Like the Western loner, he's almost surreally proper, lunatically so, considering what he does with his gun and fists. The only real sex scene in Magnum Force is a black pimp's murder of a black whore, which is staged for a turn-on erotic effect that I found genuinely shocking and disgusting. But the movie is full of what, in a moral landscape, would be sickening scenes of death. A huge metal girder smashes right into a man's face, and the audience is meant not to empathize and to hide from the sight, but to say, wow. The right-wing ideology functioned in Dirty Harry. Here, the liberalized ideology is just window dressing. What makes Harry, the sharpshooter, a great cop is that he knows the guilty from the innocent. And in this action world, there's only one thing to be done with the guilty: kill them. Alternatives to violence are automatically excluded. If we talk to Harry, if after he dispatches his 35th or 80th criminal, one of us says, "Harry, could you maybe ask the guy's name before you shoot, to make sure you've got the right man?" Harry's answer has to be, "All criminals are liars anyway," as he pulls the trigger, because that's what he wants to do, pull the trigger. What keeps the audience watching is one round of killings after another. Magnum Force is a far less skillful fantasy than Dirty Harry, and so is less involving, and it isn't likely to be as big a hit. Yet my hunch is that the audience, after these last couple years, rather likes its fantasies to be uninvolving. It's the emotionlessness of so many violent movies that I am becoming anxious about, not the rare violent movies, Bonnie and Clyde, The Godfather, Mean Streets, that make us care about the characters and what happens to them. A violent movie that intensifies our experience of violence is very different from a movie in which acts of violence are perfunctory. I'm only guessing, and maybe this emotionlessness means little. But if I can trust my instincts at all, there's something deeply wrong about anyone's taking for granted the dissociation that this carnage without emotion represents. Sitting in the theater, you feel you're being drawn into a spreading nervous breakdown. It's as if pain and pleasure, belief and disbelief, had got all smudged together, and the movies had become some skizzy form of put-on. The New Yorker, January 14th, 1974. Thank you for listening. Please like and comment and subscribe.